Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. Greetings from Big Ten Media Days. Day 2 about to get underway. Day 1 in the books. A lot of Buckeyes on day 1. A lot of Ohio State talk because, hey, look, they're in the unenviable position of having lost 3 games in a row to Michigan, but they are also the team with maybe the most talented roster in America. Expectations are high, and we're going to talk a lot about Ohio State this season. We're going to talk a lot about Ohio State today. But that's not all we're going to talk about. We got Wisconsin. We have USC, UCLA coming into the Big Ten. Iowa will be in the building on Wednesday. It gets very, very interesting. There's a lot of plot lines that start rolling in on Wednesday. On Tuesday, it was a lot of, hey, Ryan Day, are you going to beat Michigan? And I think Ryan Day has gotten used to that. But, you know, at least he's not being sued by a Michigan quarterback. That's what's going on down south at Florida, where Billy Napier is being sued by Jaden Rashada, who is now a Georgia quarterback, in one of the weirdest stories ever. We've followed it along every twist and turn. Got more twists on Tuesday. That was the due date for all the defendants to send their responses to Jaden Rashada's complaint. Naturally, all of them sent motions to dismiss. They would all like the case dismissed. Marcus Castro Walker, the former Florida recruiting assistant, Hugh Hathcock, the Florida booster, and Billy Napier himself, his attorney, sent a motion to dismiss. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, because this is one of those that would get real juicy if the case were to get to discovery, if you start to depose people. But Billy Napier hired some really good lawyers. And we'll see what the judge feels about this particular motion to dismiss, because remember, this is not a breach of contract case. So Jaden Rashada signed a contract, could have paid up to $13.8 million over 4 years. It was an NIL deal with a collective attached to Florida. Now, that contract was terminated, but it was terminated within the confines of the contract. The contract said you could terminate it for these reasons. It was terminated for one of those reasons. So it's not a breach of contract case. What Jaden Rashada is accusing these guys of is fraud. Basically saying, you promised me this, therefore it caused me to give up a deal I had at Miami, which would have paid out. And so that's the difference in this case. And that's what all of the attorneys for the defendants point out in their motions to dismiss. In Billy Napier's case, his attorneys point out that there is no direct evidence of Billy Napier saying anything to Jaden Rashada about, hey, if you do this, you'll get this. And I find it interesting because the evidence that Rashada's attorneys put in there, I'll use air quotes around evidence. They said, hey, Billy Napier said this to Jaden Rashada's dad. And it's pointed out, if Rashada's the one bringing the lawsuit, Jaden Rashada wasn't told that, or wasn't told that by Billy Napier. And of course, Napier's attorney points out, it's not made clear in the complaint how that was even moved along to Rashada, how that was even communicated to Rashada. So it will be interesting to see if this goes forward, because like if you are a college football gossip monger like myself, if that's the sort of thing that you enjoy, all of the little granular details of stuff like this, you would like to see this thing go into depositions, into discovery, where you're going to get a little more of this dirt. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to find enough there to get it to that point. We'll find out. Because this is one, like, again, Jay Rashad has nothing to lose here. If he gets a settlement, he'll get some money. That's good for him. But if the defendants don't want to pay out, if they would like to keep fighting this, I think they might have a chance to prevail. The question is, does it get to a point where other stuff's going to come out? And again, it's more just sort of the titillating aspects of this for those of us who like the real inside college football dirt. But other than that, I don't know what's going to happen in this case. So we'll find out. But we've covered every twist and turn so far, so we're going to keep it up. But yeah, that was the news on Tuesday. All of those motions for dismissal were filed. Those are the responses to Jaden Rashada's lawsuit. So we'll wait a little bit longer, see what the judge says, see if the case moves forward. If it does move forward, then we get into the dirt stuff. But if not, then it dies there. One of the weirder, dumber scenarios in college football history. But it's still going for now. Also going for now, the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. It has reinvigorated in the 3 years since Jim Harbaugh stood up on the stage here at Big Ten Media Days and said, we're going to beat them or die trying. Now Michigan has won 3 in a row. Ohio State is trying to strike back. Ohio State will enter the season with massive expectations after going ham in the transfer portal. Getting Caleb Downs, getting Quinshon Judkins. They are probably the best roster in the country. And I can tell you right now, I know what you're saying. I see the wheels turning if you're not a Buckeye fan. You're like, okay, but are you going to be Michigan? Well, that's the question that Day and the Buckeyes got more or less in 50,000 different ways on Tuesday at Big Ten Media Days. We caught up with Spencer Holbrook of Lettermen Row on 3's Ohio State site to talk about how they answered those questions. Spencer Holbrook of Lettermen Row. Today was Ohio State Day at Big Ten Media Days. Let's be real about it. No offense to the other teams who came, some of which might have very good years, but the Buckeyes are expected to win a national title here.
It was very intentional, wasn't it? Like you have 5 teams that, okay, like we'll let them talk, and then wow, that's Ohio State.
And everybody's waiting for the West Coast teams, and they'll start coming tomorrow. But this is the showcase for the Buckeyes here, which I feel like a lot of America is tired of that already. They're tired of the roster talk and all that. How about you? Because you serve an Ohio State fan audience. Are they tired of hearing about the roster machinations and just ready for this to start?
Well, you should be glad I'm not a recruiting reporter because that's a different conversation.
Different,
yeah,
exactly.
When it comes to the current roster, yes, I think the Ohio State fans are ready to see it.
Yeah.
And that's a big ask, right? To meet these expectations. The one thing that I am just stunned by now, having heard from Ryan Day, heard from all 3 players, they are not shying away from this thing. Like normally around this time of year, every coach, whether it's in the SEC, the coin term rat poison that Saban used and now Kirby uses and
Lane
Kiffin uses.
Yeah.
You hear it like, okay, we're just focused on the work now. No, Ohio State is full steam ahead. Like I asked Ryan Day, you guys seem to be embracing this. And he said, well, the guys didn't come back for nothing.
Right.
Like they didn't come back to just play football. They came back to win hardware. And so if they're going to win hardware, we have to meet the expectations. And so there's no reason not to embrace those. And so like for this team, instead of, hey, we're going to get to work, they're going to get to work. And they know that the work has to be put in, but they're also not going to shy away from like, it's natty or bust. Like if we don't do this thing, we didn't come back. We came back for nothing.
Well, in Ohio State, people don't like to hear this. I don't think Michigan people like to hear this either, but it sounds like Michigan last year.
Yeah.
Very similar tone and tenor going into the season. So you and Andy Backstrom from Lettermen Row caught up with Ryan Day here at Big Ten Media Days. Let's watch that right now.
We're here with the man who needs no introduction, Ohio State head coach Ryan Day. Ryan, thanks for joining us. How was vacation? Everything good? Were you thinking about vacation or were you thinking about 3rd and 3 while you were away?
Both. I really try to, when it's time for vacation to be with the family and be present, but not easy to do. We actually had an opportunity to kind of do both this year, be with the team, but also kind of get away with the family some. And that's great. Had a good 2-week vacation there to get away and give a little perspective and change of scenery, which was good. Came back refreshed.
When Denzel comes out, I think in March, and says natty or bust, you hear Will Howard the last couple of weeks say it's natty or bust. You hear that, I'm sure, but you also know that it's now time to tone that down a little and get to work. Like, how do you convey that? You want the confidence in your guys, but also it's not talking season anymore. You're about to get to work. Like, how do you convey that to your guys?
Yeah, well, everyone's competitive, and that's the way I want those guys feeling that way. We'll wake up and those are our goals. And but ultimately, that's all talk. What matters is building a foundation, and every team is different. Every team needs to be rebuilt. And what matters is the foundation that's built. Any house, or look at a pyramid, you think about, what's at the top. But the truth is, it's the foundation that's going to matter. And when we get to those big games, the work that we're putting in now is going to be very, very important. So we got to have a physical preseason. And, it's easy to look back on the past and try to, figure out, or dwell on the past, but that doesn't do us any good. We got to learn from it. It's the same thing about the future. Like, we can plan for it, but we got to be right now, and we got to have a great summer. Now, the summer we've had to this point has been great. We've had great urgency. We had great purpose. But now we're making that transition to preseason where now the football begins.
Ryan, you're here with Jack Sawyer, who was your first commit when this all started way back when. What's that like to be here today with him?
Well, to me, there's a lot of different leadership, and some people lead, verbally. Some people lead different ways. Jack leads by his actions. And, exactly right. Like, the thing is, Jack was the first to jump in and kind of lead that group through COVID. Jack was one of the first to decide to come back this year and kind of, get the guys going in terms of getting the group to come back and play this season and forego the NFL draft. So Jack also is a Buckeye. He's from Ohio. He knows what all that means. So, we think he's going to play his best football this season.
Denzel, not from Ohio, but from Arizona, comes here, embraces Ohio State. When you're a national program like Ohio State, embracing guys that are from other parts of the country and seeing them kind of love Ohio State. Yep. What is that like over the course of a 4-year period?
Well, we have to go get some of the best players in the country, and that means recruiting coast to coast. And now, more than ever, with the way the Big Ten is, we're going to be in a lot of different living rooms. But bringing guys in, have them understand what it means to be a Buckeye and understand the rivalry game and all those. Like, Denzel's completely bought into that. He understands that. And, a big part of that is, again, by actions. He decided to come back. He very easily could be in the NFL right now. He decided to come back, and that speaks a lot to our culture and a lot to how much he cares about Ohio State.
Is this the most difficult it has been to cut down and figure out who you're going to bring here, who you're going to have as captains? Yeah. Like, you've got so much leadership. Yes. What's that been like for you this summer to see all of those different leaders, different pockets of leadership take over the team?
It's a great problem to have, but you're exactly right. I spent a long time with Jerry. Like, how are we going to choose 3 guys?
Yeah.
And, it was a little bit was random, and we're going to try to do a good job of, and we have done a good job of getting some of the other guys out there to get them some exposure and do different things, because there's a lot of guys that deserve to be at this. Probably 12 guys I could mention that deserve to be here today. And so, it'll be interesting to see how the captain's vote goes.
You've got, I think, 9 days until you guys start training camp. Yep. Is there something that you have to get done in the next 9 days, 8 days before your head rises up from the pillow on day 1 of training camp and you say, okay, we're ready to go? Is there something that still needs to be done in these next few days that shows you that you guys are ready?
Yeah. We got not that it shows us. I feel like we are ready to go practice, but I also feel like these are great opportunities to get out there and be around be around each other, continue to build chemistry, get an opportunity to still work on football. During these kind of, workouts that we're allowed nowadays. The NCAA has opened up. So that's good. Not wearing, pads or anything like that, but preparing ourselves. But then also this weekend, allowing our guys Saturday, Sunday, and Monday to get away a little bit, refresh, be ready to go, because the preseason is going to be physical.
I know it takes time to find the identity of a team, and you've talked about that. But what did you learn through these summer workouts about your team?
They're close. They care about each other. They're not afraid of conflict. They'll call each other out. If somebody sees something, that they'll address it right then and there. And I think that shows trust, because, you can go after somebody and challenge them and know that there's enough trust there that, you can hug them after the workout. I saw that several times this summer.
That's the head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, Ryan Day. Thank you, Ryan. You are the busiest man in Indianapolis today. We're just trying to keep up. So
appreciate you guys.
So a loose, relaxed Ryan Day. He's got some practiced anecdotes, but I imagine it was very difficult to pick who he brought here. This feels like a team with about 20 captains.
That's what I think there could be 20 captains. All the guys who returned have sacrificed in one way or another the ability to play professional football and be a professional athlete for one more year. You've got Caleb Downs, who I would even argue just joined the program and already showed the leadership needed to be in that leadership role. You've got a guy who people forget about, like a Cody Simon, who maybe would have been drafted, a borderline draft pick, but he's a senior leader now, a potential captain. Like, that's an option. And so, like, I don't feel as bad for Ryan Day as I feel bad for the players who have to vote on these things, because now they've got to make a decision. Ryan Day's only named 3 captains the last couple of years. Urban used to name 7 or 8 a year. Maybe you get back to that, but trying to decide who is going to come be the spokespeople for this program today, couldn't have been me.
Yeah, Jack Sawyer, Emeka Buka, Denzel Burke, they're the ones who came. And they seem pretty loose. They seem, and like you said, they're facing this head on. They understand that these are the expectations, and that's what they came back for. And I think you can't really look at that any other way, because I covered a team. You mentioned Urban Meyer. I covered a team at Florida in 2009 where they were coming off a national title. They were supposed to win another national title, but they didn't treat it like that. They didn't treat it like, oh, we're supposed to win the national. It was everything is just a slog. Like, we can't admit that we're here to win the national title. We can't admit that one loss is the end of the world. And it just fell apart on them when they lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game. Now, different era, because that team probably would have played a 12-team playoff
and won it.
I don't know if they would have won it. They might have lost to Alabama again.
Yeah, maybe.
But this is a situation where this team will get more mulligans potentially than any national title favorite going into the season has ever gotten a chance to get.
Yeah, well, credit to Heather Dinich VSBN for asking about the mulligan thing. Ohio State doesn't want the mulligan. Listen, they are as prideful as anybody. They don't want the mulligan. And so, like, yeah, you get the mulligan. If you lose at Oregon, you're still going to make the college football playoff. If you lose to the Big Ten champion in the Big Ten championship game here in Lucas Oil Stadium, even if you lose to Michigan, and I can't really say that, but if you lose to Michigan, you get the mulligan. Well, guess what? Tough. This team doesn't want it. They just want to win every game. And, like, that's the thing is, like, I think there are programs around the country who probably look at that and say, like, okay, there's a grace period here.
Right.
Ohio State knows that, but doesn't want to admit that because they don't want to take the foot off the gas.
Well, I feel like they lived without it for so long.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's unacceptable to lose at Ohio State. It's just like Alabama. It's unacceptable to lose there, even if you have a mulligan.
And it's like every year, who's the bubble team? It's Ohio State.
Right.
Every single year of the 14 playoff, Ohio State has been a factor. Basically, like on the
either they're in or they're on the bubble, or Alabama was in or on the bubble.
Yes, absolutely. And so Ohio State fans know about the mulligan. Like, if they had the mulligan, they'd be in it every year. So why not just not use that mulligan? Michigan didn't need it last year. Why does Ohio State need it this year? And I think that's the mindset here.
Well, and Ryan Day also got asked about the conference championship game, which was crazy. Like, it was like he was watching my mailbag segment yesterday, because we talked about this. We talked about, somebody asked, does Ohio State have to beat Michigan and win the Big Ten? And I'm like, I think they have to beat Michigan. I don't think they have to win the Big Ten, especially if you've beaten Michigan, because it probably means you're in the playoff and you can go try to win the national title then, which beat Michigan, win national title, feel like the two things you absolutely would want to get out of the season. But Ryan Day got asked about the Big Ten championship and if conference championships in this era are going to be as valuable. Had an interesting answer.
But I think it's a great question and a great point. I just think that we all know how important it is to win the conference, and I think what that's meant to college football, in the tradition of college football, and playing in this stadium, and the electricity of that weekend, and what it means to win the conference, especially having 18 teams now. It just means so much, and to take that away would be a challenge. Now, when you look at it practically, from a wider lens of the playoffs and everything, I can see the argument on both sides. But until then, I'd like to play for the Big Ten championship and win the Big Ten championship. It's just that experience you can't replicate, and it's one of those things that you don't forget, and it's an experience that I think our guys deserve to play.
He came very close to saying it just means more.
He did.
It's very close.
That would have been the ultimate feather in the cap for half the country, almost half the college football landscape.
I do. Yeah. I think in Birmingham, there would have been a little victory lap around the office. Like, see, we got him.
He did it.
We made him do it.
Yeah. But I always think of the Big Ten as a little different. They're wired a little differently. And like, you win the SEC championship, you're the king of the 3-letter chant. If you win the Big Ten, like, it really does mean something.
Well, it used
to win the Big Ten.
It used to mean like when there was one bowl game,
go to the Rose Bowl.
You went to the Rose Bowl and nobody else went anywhere.
And even with the changing landscape of college football, I think the Big Ten has done a good job of keeping the Big Ten championship meaning something. Like Ohio State, let's take for example, in 2012, Ohio State was banned from the postseason.
Correct.
Wisconsin was 8-4,
right,
and then won the Big Ten, and that.
What a championship game that was.
And that was very important to us because you won the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Penn State didn't make the college football playoff, but the night before they won the Big Ten, even though Ohio State only had one loss. Like, the Big Ten has done a good job of making sure that it still means something. And Ryan Day's answer is as genuine as possible. He wants to win the Big Ten. He wants, even if he beats Michigan and wins a national title, I think the Big Ten championship trophy will also be at that parade. He will celebrate it
100%.
just as heavily.
Well, and the thing is, if you talk to any of the players who are here, it doesn't matter what team they play for. You say, we're going to clear these tables. We're going to put football down on this field, and you can play right now. They would all care about whether they won or not.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I don't know that all the fans understand when we talk about this, because you get caught up in the logistics of, well, if you're the number 5 seed, it might be better than being the number 2 seed. But they want to play to win. Like Herm Edwards, you play to win the games.
Yeah.
Like they care deeply when they go on the field about whether they won or lost.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that Ohio State has done a very good job this offseason of making sure, and Ryan Day talked about it a little bit today, you have to win the game. And that sounds super simple, but like he was asked about turnovers, and do you have to have more turnovers, especially in the Michigan game? You lost a turnover battle last year. No, we don't have to have more turnovers. We just have to win the game. It wasn't that the offense should have scored more points or the defense should have held it more. We just have to win the game. And it comes down to, did you win or did you lose? And it also works in the Big Ten. Like, did you win the Big Ten? No. Well, you could probably still win the national championship, but that year you didn't win the Big Ten. And next year when they hang those banners behind us, it won't say Ohio State. And that's very important to this program.
Yeah. And this, different program, different place now, because you got all these guys back, but also different coaching staff a little bit.
Yeah.
Chip Kelly, like, that's the craziest thing. Like, I want to go back a year and tap somebody on the shoulder and say, okay, let me spin this out for you. Because I remember we were here. It was the second day of Big Ten Media Days last year that Colorado announced they were going to the Big 12.
Yes.
And you're like, okay, the Pac-12.
My interview with you got bumped for that.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. And you thought, okay, something might be up. Like this might be it for the Pac-12. But if I had gone to you a year and 2 days ago and said, we know UCLA is going to the Big Ten, but Chip Kelly won't be coaching UCLA. He will be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State
without getting fired.
What would you have said?
Yeah, it's crazy. I will admit, we walked in to the first practice that we had open after they hired Chip Kelly and he made his way from Westwood. I looked out on the field and I almost fainted. I could not believe that I was seeing Chip Kelly with a block O and he wasn't leading the team huddle because he wasn't even the head coach. Because like if you told me Urban coached a couple years at Ohio State and then left after the national title, and they hired like hot, very hot
guy from New Hampshire. Yeah.
Chip Kelly to like come in.
It would not have been Ryan Day that you would have thought of.
Post Oregon, the Chip Kelly that we all knew and loved then as the head coach. I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. But if you tell me like, no, he's just the offensive coordinator. And by the way, his college quarterback is going to be his boss now. Like, I don't know, man. Like it's just another wrinkle to this offseason.
It was interesting hearing him talk about the division of labor because that's something that a lot of people have asked. And like, a lot of the reason for this is to give Ryan Day a chance to be more global as the head coach, take a bigger picture, more holistic approach, deal with the roster, which is something that all these coaches are saying, I need more time to manage the roster. Do you think that is working out the way he'd liked?
Yes. Yeah. I've seen a little bit of a different Ryan Day. In the spring, he was able to delegate and then walk around. He's doing running back drills. When Tony Alford left for Michigan, he was the running backs coach.
Yeah.
Until they got Carlos Lachlan, and then you saw him do some defensive back drills. He's doing the turnover drills instead of just working with quarterbacks. Well, Chip Kelly's the quarterbacks coach now. He doesn't trust anybody. He might not even trust his family more than he trusts Chip Kelly.
Yeah.
So he handed his baby, the quarterback position, over to Chip Kelly, and he's delegated. Well, this summer you've seen him make those appearances he's had to make. I saw him get on the whiteboard and talk offense at a coach's clinic. I haven't seen that from him a little. I think he's opening himself up a little more. I don't know if he's got more time because that CEO role doesn't give you much more time.
Yeah, I was going to say that they will find a way to fill it.
But he's got a lot of NIL meetings. He's got a lot of booster meetings. He's got a lot of football meetings that he's sitting in on. I think he's just a more well-rounded head coach. And this offseason's, I think, done wonders for the way that he is able to delegate and then also, have eyes on the entire program.
I wonder now, because the original plan was Bill O'Brien.
Yeah.
And then Bill O'Brien gets the Boston College job, obviously. But, would he have been as relaxed?
No.
Handing it over? Because Bill O'Brien, you kind of trust with quarterbacks, right? Bryce Young.
Yeah, in a way.
Got Matt McGloin to the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, hats off to him for that. But I don't think so. I really don't. And I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No,
but,
I understand.
Like, it is very, very quickly like a no, because I saw Ryan Day last year contemplate it for an entire offseason. Am I going to give it up? Am I going to give it up? Is Brian Hartline ready for this? And this is not a knock on Brian Hartline at all. Ryan Day talked about today, though, it is hard to give that up. You make a play, and then you practice a play, and then you put it in, and you have to call it at the perfect time. And when you call it at the perfect time and you score a touchdown, it's like the most exhilarating thing ever. And he loves that feeling. And giving that up last year was just a bridge too far for him.
Yeah.
And now he got to hire Chip Kelly, his mentor, to take that over. Like, hey, I trust you, Chip. Here's my play sheet. Bill O'Brien, good offensive play caller, very experienced coach. He's coached with some of the best coaches ever. That trust level still wasn't going to be there.
Yeah.
And so I don't see a way that he would have given it up as easily. He still would have had, I think, at least a thumbprint on that play sheet. Whereas I think he's fully given it up now and saying, Chip, this is yours.
Yeah. And I think that should help him. It's interesting because we go back and forth on this, and it's different for different people.
Yeah.
I talk about it with Hugh Freeze at Auburn. Like, Hugh Freeze should have never given up calling plays last year. They'll be better because he's calling plays. But Ryan Day, you're giving up calling plays so Chip Kelly can call plays in the offense you created that you learned from Chip Kelly.
Yes. And, I think about it, Jim Harbaugh had to give up a lot of offensive control to start beating Ohio State.
Yeah.
And eventually, as a head coach, you have to evolve. And Ryan Day has evolved on so many levels. He's evolved on NIL. He's evolved on the way that he recruits. He's evolved on staff structure and getting rid of a special teams coordinator and delegating those things. Well, he's evolving a little bit further into that CEO role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important for him. And you saw what it did for Jim Harbaugh. And I'm not saying that it's, apples to apples, but I do think that there's a little bit of a parallel there where, hey, once Jim Harbaugh gave up those play calling duties, you really saw him be able to be a head coach. And I think Ryan Day is going to be a head coach this year.
Sometimes the head coach doesn't even need to be there. Sorry. Too soon? Too soon.
Hey, they've got a decent offensive coordinator they can fall back on.
That's true. Can you imagine? Oh, God. So stop. There's a Connor Stallions documentary coming out. We don't need it. We don't need any more excitement than that. That's enough for now. But all right, speaking of Ohio State's offense, though, at what point are they going to admit Will Howard's the quarterback?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Ryan Day's done a great job smoothing this thing over.
Yeah.
I know what
he didn't do with the ACC coaches. 4 ACC coaches brought 2 quarterbacks to media days.
Yeah, no, he's not bringing a quarterback.
Yeah.
And he wasn't going to bring 2, but he did a great job of smoothing things over. And I know that sounds to people out there that don't follow Ohio State like he just kept these guys around so they wouldn't go in the portal. Mm-hmm. No, he wanted this thing open. And I think it's going to be open these first couple weeks of camp. I think he wants to see Will Howard take that job over. And it's going to be a little difficult for Will because Will's the kind of guy who puts the pads on and is better in full contact because he's kind of a brute.
Yeah, he's 240.
The way we saw him at the beginning of March into the end of April, I thought was a big step. I think you're going to see another good step for him. The way that people talk about him, sources, through the building, talk about his leadership, the way he is in the weight room, I think that's going to shine the next first couple weeks of camp. And I think by the second or maybe midway through the third week of camp, you'll see that Band-Aid get ripped off. And I think you'll see Will Howard as a starter.
Yeah. And Devin Brown, I feel bad for because he got hurt early in the bowl game. I feel like we didn't get a chance to see what he really can do, but they have gotten a chance to see what he can do in practice. And if Will Howard beats him out, he beats him out.
Yeah. And, he's a good player. You can't fault him for that. There's a reason that Charles Power, those guys named him the #1 overall player in the 2022 class, but the experience of Will Howard, the way that he can extend plays, that Texas game, the Will Howard Texas, I love watching that. Just like top level competition, a great defense, a great pass rush, and he was just a gamer.
Yeah.
And like you need somebody who I think is a gamer in this offense because you don't need him to be spectacular down to down. It's just like, hey, one game out of the year, you're going to need that guy to win you a game.
Yeah.
And he can win you a game.
I also think what they can do with his legs should keep defenses fairly honest because we know their running game is going to be good.
Yes.
We know with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, they're going to be able to run the ball. But the idea that in a read option mesh, this 6'4", or 6'5", 240-pound dude might just keep it himself. And oh, by the way, he's pretty fast too. I do feel like that is going to weigh on the minds of opposing defensive coordinators.
Yeah, and Ryan Day touched on a little bit today where they were reluctant to let Justin Fields run because the quarterback depth chart was flat out bad. Then they were
Four
reluctant.
guys on this
They
one.
were reluctant to let CJ Stroud run because the quarterback depth chart was shaky. Last year with Kyle, they weren't sure with Devin. Then he was hurt.
Yep.
You got 5 scholarship quarterbacks this year, and I think
it's 5. Oh
I think
my gosh.
4 of them are probably ready to play if they absolutely needed
Yeah.
to in a pinch. So you can be not reckless, but a little more, a little more foot on the gas with these quarterback runs because you know that the guy behind him is probably pretty good.
So you said 4 ready to go instead of 5. So would Julian Sain or Aaron Nolan be the freshman of those 4?
I would say Julian is probably the freshman of those 4. Julian showed us some things that I don't see from many freshmen ever in practice. And, it probably helped you start Jeremiah Smith some, but who got a lot of buzz today. But I do think that Julian showed enough where, like, if it was a break glass in case of emergency, he could go in there against, a Purdue or an Indiana. I don't know if he could go in there against an Oregon and win, but against those programs, I think he could probably go in there and be okay.
You mentioned Jeremiah Smith.
Oh,
that's a name that came up quite a bit with the veteran guys from Ohio State. How excited are they to unleash him on the world?
I don't know. Is this a program where I can repeat Jack Sawyer's words?
Yeah.
Okay. Jack Sawyer said, I needed to see him in practice, and he was a 5-star just like I was. But I needed to see him, and if he didn't play, that's okay.
I never thought about, like, if you've been a 5-star yourself, you're like, I don't.
And then he said, I saw him in the first practice, and I said, holy shit, this guy's good.
Yeah. And when somebody who's been a 5-star says that about a freshman, like, that's saying something.
And Denzel Burke, Denzel Burke is a guy who in March said, I still need to see something from Will Howard. Like, it just brutally honest. I mean, like, the most honest guy on the team. He said today, the world needs more honesty, and I'm going to be the guy to do it. So, that's how honest he is. He said, who's your favorite receiver to go against in practice? He said, JJ.
Already.
Why? Because he's that guy. And, like, that's the senior corner who's supposed to be a Thorpe finalist, who's going to probably challenge Will Johnson for first team All Big Ten. Yeah. He wants to go against the true freshman wide receiver because the true freshman wide receiver makes him that much better.
And Emeka Ibuka's still on the team. Carnell Tate's still on the team. These are guys that are accomplished college receivers.
Yes.
And that's who he wants. Yeah. Because he wants to go against the best. That's scary.
Ryan Day also, I have not seen Ryan Day act like this. I asked him personally, I said, what do you think about JJ? And he said, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I don't want to comment on it. He was just smiling because, like, he doesn't want to set the expectations too high.
Yeah.
But he also knows. He knows what the deal is. He knows who the guy is.
Well, going back to, like, old Urban Meyer stories, that's what he was like with Percy Harvin. Like, you knew from practice number 1, from, like, the second he touched a football, he was better than everybody else on the field.
Yeah.
Even as a true freshman. And Urban, like, could not contain his glee.
Like, I get this guy.
He just couldn't. Yeah. Like, and I think that's based on what I've heard about JJ Smith. That's where they are with him.
Yeah, they were doing a scrimmage. I think it was the first weekend of April. I just reached out to one of the sources, like mid scrimmage, and I said, "Hey, how's it going?" He said, "As I'm texting you, Jeremiah just mossed one of our best corners. I won't put him out like that, but one of our best corners. You should have been here." And it was like, that's happening just like behind closed doors every single day. And now, like, sorry, Akron. Sorry, Western Michigan. First couple weeks of the year, like, you want to set the tone, like, throw one up to him.
Yeah, you forget that this is not a year where Ohio State has.
No, that schedule was up on the screen. That schedule was up on the screen, and, like, if you put Jeremiah against a MAC corner, I pray for that MAC corner. Like, that's going to be something because Jeremiah is ready to play against the best corners in the country.
Cannot wait to see it. Can't wait to see what happens at Big Ten Media Days on Tuesday. When we come back, let's talk a little more Buckeyes with our friend Geoff Schwartz, who he played at Oregon, but didn't play in the Big. It's very confusing because Oregon's in the Big Ten, but he didn't play in the Big Ten, but he played at Oregon. But Geoff will join us to talk more Buckeyes and the West Coast invades Indianapolis. So we'll be talking a little USC at Big Ten Media Days. And yes, that feels weird to say. We'll be right back. We're joined now by the great Geoff Schwartz. Big Ten Media Days, former Big Ten star Geoff Schwartz.
Yes.
You played at Oregon.
Yeah, it's just very different than
my Big Ten like.
This is very different than my Pac-12 Media Day experience. The Pac-12 Media Day, it was one day, which I don't mind. The one day is kind of nice.
Right.
It's a long day, but it's one day. It's in a hotel ballroom. We're at a football stadium using the entire field. Like there's the entire field is up for all this, and it's 3 days, and a lot of media members here that we don't quite get in the Pac-12 footprint.
Well, but how strange is it that, like, on Wednesday, you're going to be talking to Lincoln Riley
Yeah.
at Big Ten Media Days.
Yeah. I don't know if it didn't set in yet. I mean, I think it will set in when conference games start. But yeah, I mean, you look up right above us and they have all the teams here. The oddest thing was, I think I mentioned this to you earlier today, was when they were rolling through the all-time awards in the Big Ten, and they put
Mark Carrier.
Yeah, Mark Carrier up there and players that obviously never played in the Big Ten conference. Like, that was odd to me to see that. They're going to claim the Caleb Williams Heisman, the Marcus Mariota Heisman.
Nothing wrong with that.
But I think it'll sit in when we actually play games.
Yeah.
Because right now it's just a lot of talk, and we haven't even played these games. We'll sit in. I think the first one is probably week 4. I think between a Pac-12, former Pac-12 school.
Yeah.
And,
they made you wait a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's interesting because Ohio State was here on Tuesday. They are the runaway favorite in the conference, and it's they put them with a bunch of teams that you're not worried about.
Correct.
Them competing with Ohio State. So sort of like Ohio State all day. Like, can they beat Michigan? How, as someone who was not involved in the discourse of this conference, how have you enjoyed the "can you beat Michigan? Can you finally do this"?
I mean, look, Ben Hartzog asked that question, not me or
Ben Hartzog, former Buckeye, who you work with Sirius XM.
So he can do that. I just think probably Day is just tired of it. I mean, right? Like, he's tired of it, but that's where the expectations are of the program. That's the important part when we talk about, like, what is a good year for a certain team, right?
Yeah.
1 year, Purdue winning 6 games would be like unbelievable, right? Even Rutgers getting to 8 wins this year or 9 wins.
Which they very
their
well
schedule is actually super easy. Yeah. I actually, when we were talking about Rutgers, looked at their schedule, I made an over wager on their win total. No Michigan, no Oregon, no Ohio State.
And and their total is 7.5, right?
It's 6.
It's 6. Oh, okay. I knew it was absurdly low.
I took them.
They
over
could win.
6.
They could theoretically win 9.
Yes. So, but it's about expectations, right? Ohio State and Oregon and Penn State and Michigan in this conference, it's almost playoff or bust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have Ohio State, the first thing to getting that entry is typically beating Michigan.
Right.
You beat Michigan, you're in the Big Ten championship game, you win that game, you're in the playoff. Now, obviously, with 12-team playoff, it's a little bit different. But if you lose to Michigan and make a playoff, your fans are not going to like that. Like, you have to beat Michigan, and Oregon has to beat Washington.
I think you have to beat Michigan, or you have to win the national title. Or
correct.
Both.
Yes.
It's not just lose to Michigan, make the playoff. That's not good enough. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the expectation for them, and I understand Ryan Day is probably tired of answering those questions, but that's all people care about.
Yeah.
Because you're going to beat everyone else. You might have an upset. It's college football, but the one game that was Michigan, and they just won a championship. It's no surprise that Ohio State went even harder in the portal and high school recruiting after the rival went to championship. Like, there's no surprise behind that. When Oregon State won 2 baseball championships, Oregon brought back baseball. We didn't have it since 1983. There's something with the rival. If Washington would have won last year, Oregon would have spent even more than they already have to rebuild that roster. So the expectations are so high for them that's the goal. First is beating Michigan, Big Ten championship, playoff championship.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think if he beats Michigan, it just takes so much pressure off. Everything gets back to normal. Because you look at Ryan Day's record.
It's great.
He's been fantastic.
Was it 59-6 or 57?
But he's lost three times in a row to Michigan. And I think that 3 years ago at this event, Jim Harbaugh stood up there and said, "We're going to beat them or die trying."
Right.
Like, I was hoping Day would come up here and say that. He didn't. He was very reserved.
He doesn't have that personality, I don't think. Not yet. Maybe more braggadocious later when he starts. He's still, the thing about that's really difficult for people to understand is the timeline for first-time coaches. A lot of coaches that have won championships get an opportunity to coach at a place where you don't expect to win a championship first.
Right.
Like, even Saban was at Michigan State. Like, they didn't expect to win a championship there as a head coach. Urban Meyer, who's won 2 championships, he was at Bowling Green first, right? Like, they don't expect to win. Right, it was Bowling Green, Utah. Then, if you're not somewhere beforehand, it takes you Kirby Smart 6 years.
Well,
over 10 years.
Yeah, Kirby is the one
the best example.
Because Kirby played the national title game in year 2.
Correct.
And everybody's like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Year 3, he has that fake punt in the SEC championship game. He's like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's never going to make it.
And this is why I tell people, like, it's now time. Ryan Day is year 7, I think, right? Year 7, 19, 20.
Year 8, I believe.
But nonetheless,
year 7,
with the talent he has, and now having coached for so many years, been in a playoff, he's played Michigan now, he's playing Big Ten championship games. It's time for him to take the next step up to be a playoff team, but also winning playoff games. Where I look at someone like Dan Lanning, is his 3rd year,
Yeah.
ever as a head coach,
Right.
ever as a head coach. 22-5. The expectations for Oregon are just as high as Ohio State, but I could understand if in year 3 they weren't as good as they might be in year 6 under Dan Lanning.
Well, and you actually brought up the Oregon-Washington rivalry earlier. Dan Lanning losing 3 times to Kalen DeBoer. When you look at Kalen DeBoer's history,
104-11 is
right,
his head coaching record.
winning at a lot of places already, and they say, "Oh, it's the NII." People
Doesn't
forget
matter.
he went into an NII program where he was expected to compete for national championships right off the bat, and he did.
He won 3, yeah.
Yeah,
and then he gets to Washington, and they go what? I think they lost 1 last year.
They were
and they won
11-2 the year before.
So he lost. So he was what 20? Was that like I can't do 23-3, something like
Yes.
that in 2 years at Washington. So, and I think there's moments. I think privately Lanning would tell you, hey, maybe I was a little bit not outcoached, the wrong word, but the coaches on their side had seen more football than I have.
right.
And
And I asked DeBoer about that last year, and he's like, the situations are the same. The scope is different.
Correct.
The amount of people watching is different. But he's like, I went through all of that stuff at University
I
of Sioux
remember
Falls.
hearing this from
Yeah, and it was so brilliant thinking about that. Like, oh yeah, like the 4th and 3 decision that you make at Sioux Falls is no different than the 4th and 3 decision you make at Washington. Other than
higher,
yeah,
and that's what Ryan Day is sort of going through right now.
yeah.
So that's why I think it's time for Ohio State to take that next jump. Just Oregon is not in their way, but they got to go to Autzen Stadium,
Yeah.
which is a tough place to play. And then, I would imagine there'll be a rematch back over here at some point late in December or early December, I should say. So, but it was interesting, because when we got a chance to talk to, Purdue, Northwestern, Illinois, like what they say is a good year is different than what Ohio State says is a good year.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan Day set it up on the stage. He said, just, watch what happens when you lose a game at Ohio State. It's like the world is ending basically for him. But that's the expectation. And when you look at that roster, it's fair to expect them to win the national title.
The defense is incredibly loaded. The question mark, I think, is a little bit the offensive line at times. And then, Howard. Howard's been good. I don't know if he is good enough to win a championship. He might elevate, by the way. I'm not saying he can't do it yet, but Chip Kelly's offense is not going to rely on him to do that. That's not what Chip Kelly's done over the years. People think Chip Kelly and see Marcus Mariota and some of he's a run first coach.
Right.
They're going to run the football. They're going to run the football, protect Howard. I envision in my head, like when you get to the last game of the season and someone raises the trophy up, like, do I see Will Howard doing that? Do I see Dylan Gabriel doing that? I'm not sure I would have ever said Stetson Bennett was doing that.
Right.
But their defense was that good. And Ohio State's defense, I think, can be that good to where Will Howard can be that guy at the end of the season hosting the
and it's still the most bizarre thing to me that the two quarterbacks of the favorites in this conference are there because they were beaten out by young guys at their previous place.
Yes, that's it, I think Dylan Gabriel is better than we give him credit for. I've seen videos of
I'd agree. I just think they think
arm.
Jackson Arnold is that good.
Of course.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny because, like, I go to sort of is Dante Moore, which he won't play this year. Dylan Gabriel will play, but is Dante Moore more of that championship winning quarterback than Dylan Gabriel? And again, that would be the same thing. Like, he get beat out by young guys. Actually, he's not going to lose a job this year, but like, that's important to discussion. Is quarterback play, right? Is Will Howard good enough to win championships? Dylan Gabriel good enough in those moments to win a championship? With you have Ohio State and Oregon defensively, that helps out because defensively you can rely on those guys.
Well, and Oregon's offensive line too, I think,
really
is a huge advantage. Ohio State, that's the one place you're not entirely sure how good they're going to be.
They have the same offensive line every year. Super athletic, needs to probably punch me in the mouth a little bit better.
Yeah.
And they've had that year over year. But they're still good. I mean, they often are semifinalists for Joe Moore Award or midseason honor roll. But take that next step, especially against Oregon. Again, the funny thing about the season for Oregon, Ohio State is like they have the same sort of thing. Like they play each other on October 12th. The season will be defined by that game. They both have issues to look at. They both will be exposed in that game if they have a problem. So I can't wait for that weekend, October 12th, man. And we got USC's hosting Penn State that weekend as well. That's probably the night game, I think, because Texas, Oklahoma's at 3:30 now.
Correct. Yeah.
I think Ole Miss plays someone. They'll play at noon, I would imagine.
I believe that's the Ole Miss LSU game.
And then Oregon will play. Oregon will say be at 7:30, I think, the NBC primetime game. So it's a great weekend.
I'm not going to a game that week. I'm strapping myself to my couch.
It's actually Yom Kippur on that day too, which is going to be.
How are you going to handle that?
I'm not going to Eugene. I'll tell you that. I guess it's a long way to get there, though. But no, it's going to be season defining game for both teams.
So you mentioned USC.
Yeah.
Lincoln Riley's coming here. Miller Moss is coming here.
Yeah.
Is it? What does Lincoln Riley have to do this year to get us to kind of believe in him again?
It's a great question. I mean, I think they have to show physicality on defense. Are you tackling better? I don't think their record's going to be much better. I don't see 8-4 probably is sort of.
It's a tough schedule.
Their win total 7.5, I think, which is telling you where they're at right now. But what I want to see is Lincoln Riley admitted this offseason the portal thing in the offensive line is not the way to go. Which I've been saying for years now. You can add additions in the portal, but you can't build the entire unit up there. So he finally admitted that, which means now it's going to take 2 or 3 years to build those units up to be competitive. But I want to see defensively, can you tackle?
Yeah.
Like,
as the season goes on,
correct.
especially.
And then this is something that, again, it's going to take a couple of years to figure out. Like, they need just bigger humans to play defensive line. They have small players.
Yes.
So they need to get bigger because that's what Alex Grinch always wanted. So to me, it's not even about like wins and losses this year. It's about the physicality of the team. Offensively, last year, the offense was very out of sorts. It was very out of rhythm. It was actually an offense void of a lot of pro guys, not like Caleb Williams.
Right.
Like we look at Oklahoma, what he did with all the wide receivers they've had there. He only had Jordan Addison really is a legit, like, yeah, Brendan Rice got drafted, but like a legit, and they go into this year, they have some guys, they're younger.
Yeah, Zachariah Brandt.
And I think that the tight end, the big tight end, what's his name? He was good last year as well. But they're still young though. Like, so it's developing the offense into what Riley used to be, which goes back to the physicality up front.
Yeah.
To run the football, which with Oklahoma, they need to play better up front. So I'm judging their season based off of what I see in the film, maybe not so much wins and losses.
So, if that defense is tackling by the end of the year or still tackling at the end of the year, I think because I go back to like the Utah Pac-12 championship game.
They couldn't tackle a soul.
Couldn't tackle anybody.
And that was Utah's third string tight end.
Oh, that play was just, that summed up everything for me. And I remember I wrote that column that night, like Lincoln Riley has to decide what kind of program he wants to run.
Yes.
Basically. And it sounds like he has realized that. Like you said, you got to have bigger. Now, the Alex Grinch thing, it always amazed me because I remember going to Washington State when he was the DC there.
He was great there. Because,
and they had Hercules Mataafa.
Yeah, it was like
225-pound D tackle.
Yeah. But at Washington State, you have to play that way. You have to be small. You're not going to get big players. So you're going to be smaller. And you're going to move a bunch. And USC's problem was they're small, but also they were out of position so often because they blitz so much.
Yeah.
And when you blitz like you do, especially in the run game, if I can seal you off, you're out to the house. Like you have to get to certain places. If guy is going here, you got to go there, right? So, I wonder if he embraces those changes. It comes down to practice habits too, man. You got to hit in practice. Got to be physical in practice. So I'm curious to see how they do this year. They don't have a Caleb Williams. Miller Moss played well in the bowl game. I wonder if Maava will play at all. I don't think it's a quarterback competition very much.
It feels like Miller Moss is the guy, and Maava was good for UNLV last year, but it feels more like they're grabbing him as a QB of the future potentially.
But they also have what's his face,
Malachi Nelson's at Boise State now.
So. You're right, he did transfer. Yeah, the Lewis kid who committed. He might be
Lewis. We'll see. He's committed right now.
I know. Colorado's making a push.
Frequent topic of conversation on this show.
I find recruiting so fascinating. Dan Rubenstein,
of course,
solid verbal. May have the longest running college football podcast. Like it just started like a 2008.
The original.
Like it was like it's Ojibwe. He got me into recruiting like 3 years ago, and it's not been good for my health. Like he is legit. Like I am like down. Like
you need to comp you the On3 subscription.
I am down. I will take one of those. I am down like message board madness, and it's the crystal ball. And I saw Steve here earlier. Like I don't know how these guys do it.
Oh, so last week was a bad week for you with DJ Pickett picking LSU.
No, but here's the thing about
we'd all said, he's going to Oregon. He's going to Oregon.
But bad is relative because in 3 months he might come to Oregon. Like,
true.
That's the thing about this. And also he might, we lost Dante Moore last year. He's not on our roster.
That's true.
So it's all an ebb and flow of recruiting. But this game used to be more X and O's.
Yeah.
Like you can out scheme someone.
Yeah.
When I chipped Kelly at Oregon, we out schemed teams. We just did. Out tempo down scheme.
Like went to Michigan and just destroyed them with scheme. Yes.
Correct. And we're faster.
Yeah.
But nowadays it is about scheme. You got to be able to coach, but it's about having enough players.
Yeah.
You have to have dudes, and Oregon's getting those dudes. Ohio State has those dudes. Yeah, Dan Lanning, he can sim pressure the heck out of teams, and he certainly did that a lot last year. But in the end, you have to just have better players, and this game has come down to that. And USC, back to USC, they don't have those players right now,
which is amazing to me.
because
when Pete Carroll was there, they did.
I know I played those teams. It was hard. But the thing about USC is a good, I think, reminder around college football that you have to always adapt. And I'm from Southern California. I know USC my entire life. My parents are Bruins. I've played the Pac-12, did Pac-12
Your
radio
brother
for
played
years.
for
My
Cal.
brother played for Cal.
Yep.
Is that the kids now do not care what happened in 2005. They like Reggie Bush, certainly do. But you have to recruit and talk about now.
Yeah.
Talk about now, because now is what people care about. A lot of these programs are so stuck in the past, man. What happened 20 years ago, 30 years or 40 years ago, that's not now. And USC, I think with the hire of Riley, they sort of stepped out of that, because for so many years they just hired USC guys.
Right. They were,
And
did
USC
you know Pete
ADs.
Carroll? Did you work with Pete Carroll?
And
exactly.
USC ADs were
Yeah,
always
yeah.
tied to like,
Yep.
and you're like, why is Pat Hayden an AD? Why is, like, it's like, it never made sense. So they have, I think for so many years, Andy, they were so like, we're USC, people are coming to USC.
Yeah.
It's USC. They're going to come.
Yeah.
And then they're not anymore. So you have to go, you have to try harder to recruit players.
Yeah. And I think the wake-up call for Riley probably was right when he got there, because they're going after Josh Connerly, who is a big-time recruit, and Lanning gets him.
Yeah.
He's now Oregon's left tackle.
Yeah, that was Lanning's first big recruiting win.
And that's who USC could really use right now.
Oh, yeah. And also, putting guys in the NFL is hugely important to a lot of these players.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at USC's draft picks over the last 10 years, some good wide receivers.
Yeah. Caleb.
Yeah, I think he'll be good.
Yeah.
But that's it. I mean, like what Oregon's putting dudes out every year.
Right.
And this year they're going to have, 2 offensive linemen drafted. So USC is going to get back to getting pro bodies and getting those pro guys drafted.
Yeah. And that's what, since you've been down the recruiting rabbit hole, like they had this hot streak of commits, especially on the D line.
They were never.
Those dudes have all flipped.
They were never. That was like fool's gold. Those kids from the South would not go to USC if Georgia's calling them.
But it's funny because they used, like, the kids from the South used to go to, like, Leonard Williams, Daytona Beach, Florida, going to USC.
The equation is so different now, right? Because NIL, and I do not believe that every kid goes to school for money.
Right.
Okay? I think that's a huge misconception about the NIL. There are certain kids certainly that go to school for the money.
Yes.
90% of them do not. The money's there, of course, but everything else is important.
If you're being recruited by Georgia, Ohio State, USC, Texas, Nebraska, everybody,
the money's about the same.
the competitive offers are competitive.
Yes.
Like you're picking between competitive offers.
Correct. And so, but if you're, again, going back to development, right? Like when Pete Carroll was at USC, the team I played in 2007, the team we beat, all 11 guys got drafted on defense, and their backups got mostly drafted, right?
Jeez.
So, like, the offensive line was Everson Griffin, Lawrence Jackson, defensive line, Lawrence Jackson, Philly Moala, Cedric Ellis, Ray Maluga, Keith Rivers, Brian Cushing, Matthews, Taylor Mays. So when you watch a USC game back then, you're like, okay, that guy's going to the NFL. And players want to go to the NFL.
Yeah.
So when they're choosing a team, if you're Georgia, you say, hey, defensive lineman, guess what? You come here and go to the NFL.
Yeah.
And Oregon right now, you look at Kayvon Thibodeau and Herbert, obviously, and Penei Sewell. I mean, like, you're getting these guys now, high-level NFL players. Yeah. They're able to tell kids, if you come to Oregon, we'll develop you. First-round corner and Gonzalez as well. Like, that matters to players, and USC's got to get back to having those players on campus so more people see them in that light.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's a chicken egg thing, because you've got to get those guys and then get them to the NFL, and then the floodgates really open.
Yes.
So how do you do that?
You recruit big bodies and you try to develop them. And that's what you have to do, which I know sounds simple enough, but I think that, where Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch on defense just didn't develop guys. I think offensively they developed guys. Yeah. But defensively they just never did.
So another one I wanted to ask you about is Washington, because you followed Jedd Fisch closely at Arizona. I feel like everybody assumes that Washington's going to just disappear into the ether because the team that played for the national title, most of the starters are gone. But I mean, Jedd Fisch is starting so far ahead of where he started at Arizona. This feels like a much easier rebuild than Arizona.
It does. I'm going to find. I have this picture that I need to find. I sent a bunch of guys like the Washington depth chart, and just like every single player I crossed out that was on their team last year is like not there anymore. Because that's the hardest part, I think, is like you return I think 3 guys on defense at your 22,
Yeah.
or your 44. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Everyone is replaced, and so Jedd Fisch has to build up a culture and an environment from scratch, and that's the hardest part. It took him Arizona 3 years. Obviously, different situation, 1 win to
Right.
10 wins, but they just to the point of like talent, like they just need to rebuild all that. Guys, Washington last year had first round quarterback, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
2 offensive linemen drafted in the first 2 rounds,
First round receiver.
first round receiver, 2 second round receivers, I believe.
Yep.
They will have an NFL running back, tight ends that are in camp. They had a pass rusher that got drafted, 2 other guys, a linebacker, a safety. Like they were so pro talented. They don't have that right now. And so he's got to figure it out. But Jedd Fisch has shown at Arizona that he can do it. The question becomes, obviously, if your alma mater comes calling, and
His
then
alma
and
mater,
then,
yes.
and then Washington has to figure out what happens if that happens again.
I don't know. I think they put a pretty big buyout on him, so it's gonna be pretty tough. But the thing I think about though with that is a lot of the Washington backups stayed because they realized I can start for Washington now.
Sure.
And those are guys that DeBoer or even
Well,
Jimmy Lake, Jimmy Lake was a good recruiter.
I think that all the Peterson guys are gone.
Yeah, the Peterson guys are all
but
gone.
Lake recruited well.
But Lake recruited well, just didn't coach him that well.
No.
DeBoer recruited well. So I do think
Well, he recruited okay.
Right.
His Alabama recruiting probably is hurtful to Washington fans.
Slightly different.
Yeah, slightly
different level.
He just had a very veteran team last year. So Jedd Fisch is starting from over. But they're not going to like 2 wins.
Right.
But I think they're very capable for being 6-6 or 5-7. Like it could be just no depth, man.
Nobody has any depth.
Yeah. So
except Ohio State.
I think it's a interesting drop. Washington's so interesting to me too, because the Joe Moore Award, which I'm part of,
Right.
It's the offensive line award. We give it to the best offense in the country. We bring this 300-pound trophy and we put it in your facility. And Michigan, for example, won 2 years in a row. It sat in the weight room for 2 years, did not move. Well, Washington's is in the indoor facility, I believe. They don't have anyone on the team that played on the offensive line last year, and their offensive line coach is gone. So this Joe Moore Award just sitting there without any of the players that are there to earn it. So they just have a lot of building to do.
Yeah. And you don't have anybody to teach, hey, this is why we want it.
Correct.
This is how we want
Yes.
it. Yeah. That is tough. But I have faith in Fisch as long as he's there.
He can coach
to get it done.
To coach.
Yeah. But all right. So interesting day on Tuesday. Lots of different types of teams coming in. Now that you're a Big Ten media member, now that you're Big Ten legend.
Yes.
Who are you most excited to talk to?
Well, I just like Jonathan Smith. And I think that people are going to find out. We all said he's done a good job at Oregon State, but people I don't think understood what that meant. Aiden Childs can ball.
Yeah.
Like he's a legit quarterback. So I kind of want to hear from him just like how he plans to sort of build that up fast. And then, Kurt Ferentz, I think he's going to get a lot of questions about his offense.
Yeah.
Like just figuring out sort of how I'm sure he'll be ornery about it, but it is what it is.
Am I crazy to think they could be very good this year? Like if their offense is adequate.
If they average 25 points a game, yes.
Like they could be 10-2.
I don't look at their schedule, but yes.
It's when you see it, you'll go,
it's certainly,
they got a good draw.
It's certainly doable.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to hear about his offensive plans.
Yeah, I am too. And I want to know, and I don't know if he'll say this, how much of what Brian ran was because Kirk told him to, and how much of it was because if you ask the Iowa people, they'll tell you, hey, Kirk kind of let Brian do his thing. And we'll see if he lets Tim Lester do his thing. That
hampers a lot of coaches, right?
Yeah.
And what's interesting about the Iowa session, they win a lot of games anyways.
I know.
They win a ton of games.
Yeah.
But it's always that offense that holds them back. Coaches get in their own way. So Kurt Ferentz is an offensive line guy. He's always going to want to run the football. That's where they got to get better too. Their offensive line has taken a big drop last couple of years.
Well, we're going to find out. You're going to talk to all these guys. I'm going to talk to all these guys. Big Ten legend.
Yes.
Geoff Schwartz.
I love it.
The great Geoff Schwartz. We didn't even get into the video game. Geoff and I talked offline for a solid 15 minutes about offensive strategy in the video game. And let me tell you, it is humbling to hear how someone who played offensive line in the NFL for a long, long time figures out how to easily destroy young children at video game football when I, an adult who did play football, but not at that level or anywhere close to it, cannot quite figure that out with my 14-year-old. But Geoff is we'll have him back on, because I think we just need to have a strategy session on the video game with people who truly understand football. Because Geoff is just talking about, like, you're just spreading. He's looking at receiver splits in the formation when he decides how to run. He's making sure the boxes are as light as humanly possible. He's just goading you into letting him run all day. Of course, he's an offensive lineman. He just wants to run all day. But we'll talk to him about that later. But Geoff is so much fun because, as a former Oregon offensive lineman, all of this is as weird to him as it is to all of us. Like, the idea that USC is going to be at Big Ten Media Days today. It's mind-blowing, but it's here. Iowa also will be at Big Ten Media Days. On Tuesday, a noted Iowa alum was at Big Ten Media Days. Of course, that is Illinois head coach Bret Bielema. And as you know, if you've followed Bret Bielema's career through his head coaching stints at Wisconsin and Arkansas and now at Illinois, Coach Bielema's got an Iowa tattoo. He's got a tiger hawk on his leg. And he gets asked all the time about, well, why don't you, are you going to remove it? Or are you going to cover it up? And he's like, no, it's part of me. He talked again on Tuesday about why he keeps that there.
Because you want, like, it's part of who you are.
Yeah.
Could you tell that part of the story?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I always say it's a hell of an idea when I was 19. It was a rainy Saturday in Iowa City, and there held a lot going on. So somebody said, let's get a tattoo, and we did it. I had to go up to Cedar Rapids, but, I didn't really think I was ever going to be the head coach at Wisconsin or Illinois in my future. So, but I say it to our players all the time. I never met a successful person who wasn't proud of where they came from, right? And that was part of my playing time and my coaching. A lot of who I am today was developed while I was there, so that represents that. We have some fun with it. I remember I tell the story. We had a defensive lineman my first year there in the spring. I was walking out there with we had, obviously it was warmer, so I had shorts on with my shoes, and he's like, Coach, you already got an Illinois tattoo? And I looked at him, I said, yep, that's an Illinois tattoo, right? He didn't know there was a tiger hawk in the middle. He didn't quite figure that part out, but he wasn't one of our stronger academic performers. But I think about that all the time. It kind of.
You ain't getting that from Kirk Ferentz on Wednesday. Though I do want to hear from Kirk Ferentz on Wednesday, because I think Iowa might be kind of good this year. And Lincoln Riley's going to be here. And Matt Rule's going to be here. And James Franklin's going to be here. It's going to get spicy in Indianapolis. Talk to you tomorrow.